When I worked on packaging and graphic design at Games Workshop, one of my favourite parts of that job was miniature photography, and to this day I still absolutely love doing it because I find the whole process really fun and satisfying. Recently on Twitter I mentioned the possibility of me maybe doing a video where I go through some of the techniques I use to get really high quality box art ready miniature photography, and to my delight people seemed really interested, so I thought I'd give it a go. This video is going to be all about how to take clean, individual, high-quality pictures of your miniatures for things like social media or even box art. We're not really going to be covering those big, detailed, in-world army shots, as that requires a whole different set of skills and equipment to do. But if you like this video and you'd like me to do a second one which does cover those big, cool army shots, then please let me know in the comments section and I'll try to schedule it in. But for now, I'm going to teach you how to do professional miniature photography at home to get your miniatures looking box art ready in no time. Whoosh. I'm going to start by quickly running you through all the equipment that I use for my photography here at Rogue Studios, and the setup I have here is pretty similar to the one I used at Games Workshop, and your one at home may be a little bit different, but this is the one that I've become used to by now. I have a light box, a DSLR camera, which in this case is fitted with a macro lens, some small LED lights which really pack a punch, a bunch of tripods for my lights and camera to stand on, a turntable, which in this case will just be used to place my miniature on, but is also great for video 360s, and a miniature to photograph. We're also going to be using my trusty laptop, which has the Adobe suite on it, of which we will be using Photoshop and Lightroom. Your first step is going to be to find somewhere bright to take a photo of your miniature, and since we're doing box art photography, the real aim is to illuminate our miniature from every angle so that we can show off all the sculpted and painted details as best as we can. As well as that, you're going to need a clean white background for your miniature to sit on, and as I just showed you, I have a light box and a few extra lights, which is super handy. But when I worked in the specialist design studio, I just had 2 big lights and 2 pieces of white card, and I did all my photography on those, so I'm sure you can make do with just the things you have around at home. Once your miniature is in the set and lit up with some well-angled lights, it's time to set up your camera, and like I said, I'm using a DSLR with a macro lens, which is propped up by a pretty standard but sturdy tripod, which just stops my camera from moving around and shaking in between and during photographs. Now, cameras and camera settings are often really intimidating and confusing, even for me who's been doing this for years and years, and I'm sure there's loads of miniature photographers who do it differently and even probably better than me. But I'm going to quickly show you the settings I use for my camera setup in this lighting, so pause here if you want to take note. One of the main things to remember is to make sure that your ISO or ISO isn't super high, or your miniature photography will end up looking extremely grainy. Good lighting on your miniature will help you loads with this, and it'll mean that you don't have to rely on long exposure times or high ISOs to see all your details fully. But if you're using your phone camera for this, then all of that probably isn't going to be an issue. Just make sure your miniature is in focus and well lit. Now that your camera is set up and steady and your miniature is well lit and doesn't look over or underexposed, it's time to find that golden photography angle for your miniature. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Games Workshop have a very specific angle that they photograph all their miniatures at, and once I tell you, you're not going to be able to unsee it, because it just means that they can put any miniature from any range next to each other on a page, and they all kind of look like they were photographed at the same angle. It's really smart and it's a really cool secret, so I'm going to show you how they do it. Here you can see that when we look at this photo like it's a flat image, the distance between the top and the middle section of the base, which would be each end of the flat parts of the base, is the same size as the height of the rim, and that is the golden angle we want our miniatures to be photographed at. As far as what photography angle you have to twist your miniature at to get the best photo, that is going to depend entirely on what your miniature is. I usually like to have my miniature facing frontwards to the camera and showing off as much detail on the miniature as possible. Sometimes that can be quite tricky if the miniature has a particularly dynamic pose or has a weapon in front of his face or something like that. I always recommend taking a few shots at a few different angles so you're sure you've got one which works best. But for this guy it was quite easy. Just face onto the camera with as much of the miniature showing as possible. Now I'm going to teach you the real secret sauce to make all your miniature photography great and fantastic forever, and it's a little trick called photo stacking. A lot of the time when you take a close-up picture of a miniature, you'll find that the front is in focus but the back isn't, and photo stacking is a way to fix this. This method is simply taking multiple pictures which have each part of the miniature in focus, and then using Photoshop or another photo editing program to stitch all those images together into one fully focused image. Sometimes for an individual miniature shot, photo stacking isn't necessary, but since I'm as close to the miniature as I can get with a macro lens, and I'm aiming for as detailed a shot as I can manage, photo stacking is what we're gonna do. When I photograph my miniatures, I like to put my camera on a nice sturdy tripod, but if you're using your phone camera at home, then try propping it up on something steady, and consider putting a countdown timer on it so that it's moving as little as possible in between and during your photographs. We're going to start by focusing on the very front of his base and take a picture of that area. Then I'm going to work my way back through the miniature and make sure I take a focus picture of each plane of the miniature until my focus is concentrated at the back of the base. Depending on the size of your miniature, you may only need to take 2 pictures to stitch together, but in this case I took 3 or 4 to make sure that everything from the tip of his nose to the frog in a string was captured in full focus. On top of that big main shot, I'm going to do some more quick shots around some of the other detailed parts of the mini, like his frog and his face and his fish, so that I can use that for more detailed shots on the back of the box too. Now that you've got all your photographs, it's time to do the stacking bit, and for that I'm going to be using Photoshop, but I think there are free programs online and offline that you can use which also have this stacking ability. I'm just going to use Photoshop because it's what I know and I hate change and I'm stubborn. Once my pics are all on the computer, I load up Photoshop, go to File, Scripts, and then Stack Images. I put all the files I want to stack into the program and make sure that I select auto align and then I press go. It may take a little bit of time to load depending on the size of your images, but eventually all the images go in and as best they can automatically align themselves. Then we're going to select all of the images in our layers tab and click edit and then go to auto blend. This will automatically find all the areas of focus on each individual image to create a single focused image. And now we are ready to go on to the next step, which is editing our photo. Now, depending on what you just photographed, this editing stage can take minutes or hours. And like I said, if there's enough interest in this video, I will definitely do a follow-up one on how to photograph and edit larger scenic shots. But since we're just focusing on a single miniature photograph for now, it will fall into the minutes category. We're going to open up our fully stitched picture in Lightroom, which is my preferred method of editing, and we're going to do a few things first. Right now, this image looks a little bit grey and dull, so I'm going to bring up the exposure by just a few points. Then I'm going to make the miniature pop just a little bit more by subtly raising the highlights, and then I like to skip contrast for now and go right to the shadow section. I like to bring up the shadows just a little bit as I want as much of the detail to be seen as possible, and then I go back to the contrast to make sure the piece doesn't look grey cast and murky, and it's looking much better already. After that, I usually head down to the colour correcting section. Now, photographing the miniature on a white background means that this step should be pretty easy. You can pop the little dropper onto the white area and Lightroom will automatically adjust the colours based on what you've registered as a neutral colour. Sometimes it does require a little bit more manual tweaking until it's just right and your colours read as how they look in real life. If you like, you can boost the saturation or the vibrancy of your miniature just a little bit, but I don't recommend doing this too much as it can destroy a lot of the detail on your miniature and make all the colours look different to how you intended to paint them. If possible, I prefer to use the vibrancy tool, which should boost the saturation a little bit more without sacrificing the detail. Then the picture is all done and ready to be clipped out for the front of the box. Clipping an image just means removing a picture from its background, so all that's left is just the image you want to use, and it's similar to clipping out a picture in a magazine using scissors so that you can put it in a scrapbook or something like that. And there's a few different ways that you can clip images using Photoshop. The cheap and easy way to clip a miniature is to use the Magic Wand tool. It'll select all the areas of the same colour in an area that you click on, and then you can use a layer mask to hide them. But often the Magic Wand tool isn't perfect, and there's always little graphic details left behind and little sharp white lines in areas that it always misses. So in a professional setting, I don't really recommend using the Magic Wand tool. It's usually the first thing I look out for when I'm assessing box art photography, and you can always spot when someone's used it. So I wouldn't use it unless you're super sure that you've checked the image and you're happy with the results. The tool I like to use is the pen tool here, and it does take some time, but using the pen tool you can create an outline all around your miniature which is much more precise and clean, and then you can use that outline to create another layer mask. As you can see, the result is far more precise, and I don't have any weird giant graphic elements or white outlines. It's much better. The most recent update of Photoshop also has a new subject select tool, and it does look much better than the Magic Wand tool, but similarly to the Magic Wand tool, there's also some accuracy issues and weird leftover graphic elements, so I would still recommend using the pen tool anyway, at least for now. And now, all that's left to do is to drop your perfect miniature photograph onto whatever background you like maybe some packaging for your own miniature range, or even a wholesome family photo to complete the picture. I hope you all found this slightly different miniature tutorial useful, and if you have any questions about how I photograph my miniatures, or you'd like to see some more technical videos in the future, pop a comment down below so I can read them. I really like reading your comments because it lets me know what you want from my channel, which is very important to me. But for now, I'm afraid that's all we have time for, so as usual, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Bye bye!